while I was absent on Monday. I had flu symptoms and strep throat. So.
I remember, didn't you give it to me? I thought you gave it to me.
I showed you. I'm not sure.
Okay, so what we're talking about today is some basic use of cameras, how to control them, how to animate them, and how we can use them in our final presentation of our logo text compositions. So what I have here is a basic scene, and I just created the text and extruded it, added this little landscape, and you can see I have a sky object in there. And here, you can render it out so you can see what this is going to look like. I added a little bit of a bump channel to the ground so that it has a little bit of texture. It's taking a little bit longer to render because I added some in the output, in the render settings, I added some ambient occlusion, which gives it a little bit of extra sort of shading shadow on different surfaces, so it really looks like it's part of the scene. So we get this kind of nice, nice resolution. Nice textured object kind of placed in an environment. That's what we're working with here. Okay, you can see this is taking a while to load, so I'm not going to show it all. Now, in order for us to put a camera in here, what we need to do is very simply just go up into, you can either go to the Objects palette, okay, or you can go where the lights are located and just scroll down to Camera and drop a basic camera in here, okay? Now, when you do that, you see what happens. You get this green bar around the frame. Okay, depending upon your render settings, if you render out at a widescreen, you'll get more of a widescreen view camera. We have standard sort of definition here right now, like 800 by 600. So you get this more square format, and that will dictate what your camera is seeing. Now, before you can see through the camera. Now, first of all, when you put the camera in, it's going to put in the view of the viewport that you've located. All right. So even with this camera in, I can move around, and you see how the frame is moving with that form? Because I'm not looking through the camera yet. I'm still in the editor mode. Okay, so there's a difference between looking through the editor mode. So here's the editor mode. And then if we want to look through the camera, and let's just look at where the camera is. I'll show you. Here's the camera. If we look at the top view, this is the position of the camera. And you see these green lines? This is the field of view. Okay? So if we go back to that, our perspective view, this green line this green box designates our field of view through the camera. So if we want to look through the camera, we go up to Cameras in the viewport editor and just select Camera, all right? Right there. Now, if I were to name this something else, like, I don't know. Let's just call it Camera 1, for example. That will show up here. Okay, so you can have more than one camera in the scene. They render out as invisible, so you won't be able to see them. Sometimes if you have a scene that you want complicated edits, let's say you want to have one camera view for one animation and then simultaneously another camera view, you could record or render out from those different cameras at different times. So just by simply selecting between the cameras. Okay, so once now that I've selected camera, now whenever I move or manipulate the camera, that view is also going to change as well. So for example, if I go to the top view and just grab the z-axis, you see if I move the camera, now the scene is moving along with you. You can see it in the perspective view, and we can see that the camera is definitely moving. All right? So that's a possibility for animation. Okay, so you could just simply grab the camera, animate it, keyframe it from point A to point B, and you would have motion, your camera moving and recording that form. Now, one thing that we can see about the camera as well, if we go down to the Attributes Manager, we have a few things that we can look at. One is the focal length. Okay, this is going to change the distance to which the object is in focus. So if we start to decrease that, you see it's getting farther away, and if we increase it, we're getting closer. It's kind of like zooming in with a zoom lens camera. Okay, the same is true for the field of view. If we increase the field of view, the object is going to be looking smaller. This is giving us more of a wide angle lens. Okay, and if we decrease that, we're going to be getting closer and closer. Now, even though those effects look like they're similar, there's a big difference between a wide-angle lens and sort of a telephoto lens, for example. So if we're really close to an object, sometimes we want to include a wide-angle lens to kind of give that curvature of space a little bit, to give that illusion of distance and form. Now, either of those things you can keyframe, and move throughout the scene. All right, now one thing about the camera that's important to note is that if you move this, it's not going to always keep your object in the frame of field. So if you want to have a pass-by, let's say for example, you could animate the camera moving past a drive-by sort of situation. Okay, but if we go up and down in the viewport, you see the same thing is true. It's not sort of keeping in line with the object. There's another type of camera that we can use that will keep our focal point in one place and allow us to manipulate the camera as we go. And that's called a target camera. So let's just go ahead, again, under the lighting setting here, we can just go down and click target camera. And this is going to bring in a new camera into our scene. Now, in this case, if we click on target camera, obviously we don't see anything in here. I'm just going to call this one camera 2, so we know which one it is. The target is placed in here, and the camera is placed in another section. All right. So if we zoom out on the top view, we can see camera 2 is over here to the side, and the target is actually positioned at 0, 0. Okay. So let's just go up to cameras, and now you can see there's 2 cameras that are located here. Let's just grab camera 2, all right, and look through there. So when we do that, we don't see much of anything. And the reason is that we need to move our target. Oh, I'm sorry. Just pause here for a second. Okay, so now we've located the target camera. So if you navigate between camera 1 and camera, you can see that this is the first view, camera 1, and then the target camera is the second view. Now the camera is going to move according to what the target is. So there's 2 ways that you can really animate this type of camera. One is that if you move the camera, or if you move the target, you see the camera is always going to follow the target. So as I move this target around, the camera can stay stationary, and its rotation or placement is going to be based on where the target is. All right, so that's one way of dealing with it. The other thing is that if we select the camera itself, if we keep the target at 0, 0, that original placement, we can move the camera around, and it will always keep that target in the center of the frame. So if we zoom in close, and then you notice as I drag the x-axis, it's moving around the target and changing its position. So we're constantly going to have that scene in focus. So if you want to have that sort of helicopter kind of zoom in effect, kind of moving around it, that target image is a good way to go. And again, you can just simply keyframe the position and follow it along in that scene. All right. So the difference between a regular camera is there is no target that will follow. A target camera is always going to allow you to manipulate the position of the target and the position of the camera based on that target. So with the target camera, you can animate both simultaneously. So you could animate the target moving and the camera moving simultaneously, and you'll get that sort of smooth passage along the way. So my suggestion in working with cameras is to really utilize the auto keyframe. So for example, if we're animating the target camera, I'm just going to click on the auto keyframes. I'll drop in a frame at the beginning here, and then as I move forward in the timeline and move the camera, we'll get some motion to happen. Just keyframe that. And then also, if we were to move ahead in the timeline, we can also change the field of view, for example, to go in farther and out farther, and that will keyframe as well. So if we play this through now, we should have a motion that reflects that keyframing of passing with the target camera and then also zooming in with the lens itself. So there's many different ways, and you can see that if you look down in the attributes, moving the focal length actually changes both the focal length and the field of view, and we need to keyframe those both simultaneously. So that's why it's always helpful to use the auto keyframes when you're doing that, so everything is selected along the way. All right, what we just talked about was the difference between the editor camera and the actual cameras themselves. So if we're in one of the camera views and we want to manipulate the scene or the object that we have in play, we can always go back to cameras and editor camera, and then we can manipulate the view without changing the position of the camera at all. So this is really helpful when we're still working on models, when we're dealing with materials or space or light or any of those other elements of the actual scene. Always use the editor camera for that. And whenever you're working with animation between an individual camera, definitely look through the actual lens of the camera to see how that interacts.